Hi, it's Alexandra here. Welcome to my podcast in which I talk about finding myself, my own life path, and the people that I meet on this path. This podcast is usually in Polish, but so many of my friends ask me to record this specific episode in English. Here you are. We'll see if more episodes will come. In today's episode, I would like to talk about a quite common phrase that most of you have come across somewhere on the internet or in conversations. I'm not sure though if it's popular abroad, but it's very common in Poland, namely the sentence drop everything and go to. And the most popular sentence is probably to drop everything and go to the mountains or to the lake, to the seaside. And you can add here any place that you associate with nature and freedom. I remember that the first time I saw this sentence as the title of an event on Facebook, in my naivety, I thought it was really about some sort of happening where all people on a given day would drop everything and meet in a given place. I think that under this innocent and quite romantic sentence, there is actually some kind of longing, maybe dissatisfaction with the way our lives look, a desire to be and do something in a different place that we are right now. And looking from the perspective of how often this sentence appears, I'm convinced that I see it several times a year, year after year. It might mean that it applies to a really large group of people. Besides, in my office work, such thinking was quite common. Time was counted from Friday to Friday, from holiday to holiday, and in between there was only complaining, counting, and waiting. But why am I talking about this? This is quite closely related to my current life situation, namely professional burnout. In my last episode, I talked about my education. I studied architecture for a total of 6 years, plus 2 years of preparation to get into these studies. And since autumn 2021, I've been working as an architect, first in one of the Warsaw offices, and then since the beginning of this year in Japan. And if I had heard about burnout in architecture before, in my mind it was usually associated with working in an office for a couple of years or in a high and stressful position, for example, as a project manager. And it seemed to me somehow acceptable back then. And here I am, less than 2 years after graduating, when I found myself in the same burnout point. And I must add here that both in Warsaw and in Japan, I was really lucky to get great projects and teams. So what happened during this less than 2 years was quite difficult for me to grasp. And so came May this year, when I knew I could no longer continue working in an office as an architect. And that was also the time when I returned from Japan to Poland. Actually, a week later, I got married and we went to our honeymoon to Iceland. And I remember one day when we were climbing such canyon, a beautiful place. And I was thinking, what can I do next with my work? Because every thought that I could do something related to architecture was associated with some sort of a cry within me. And also because at that time, thanks to therapy, I already learned how to listen to my emotions. I knew that it's not a way to go. And then when we reached some sort of a plateau from where there was a beautiful view of the canyon, the waterfall and the rainbow that was starting from there, I was overcome by such a feeling of beauty, but also some sort of uncertainty and a bit of a slight sadness. And I remember that for the first time in my life, I felt the need to take care of myself, to give myself some respite and a sense of bliss, peace, and beauty, at least for a moment. Then I thought that I really didn't have the strength to continue fighting. I didn't have the strength to throw myself into another job that was causing stress in my body from the very beginning. And that I wanted this feeling of being taken care of and free. Then I started to think if there is something in my life that gives me some happiness, something that excites and makes me happy. And I realized that art was and is such an element. Although I left art school a very long time ago, and then somehow I devoted most of my time to architecture, art always aroused excitement in me. I think here about two museum trips that particularly stood out in my memory. This is the Albert and Victoria Museum in London, where I was stunned by the beauty of the exhibits, especially the section of ceramics, and the Picasso exhibition in Hakone, Japan, where there were lots of ceramics and fabrics with abstract painting. So then I came up with this idea. What if I gave myself 3 months to experiment with art? 3 months where, for the first time in my life, I won't do what I should, but what I would like. Will I be able to explore, create, and basically live the life I want? Of course, it sounds great, but I must admit that after so many years of following a certain pattern, when I didn't listen to myself and my needs, it was very difficult for me to actually make this decision. And that's why I think I chose to pursue art instead of choosing one specific field, because I couldn't quite see for myself if this was what I wanted to do. That's why I rather follow the shreds of memories from museums when the works of art I saw made me excited and wanted to create something similar. So we came back from Iceland. June was spent looking for an apartment to move in. And that's how July began. And with July, my promised 3 months. Here, there should be also an answer to the question where I got the money to live, because I'm always curious about this matter in such projects. And here I think the answer is simple. I got money partly from my savings, because then I've just completed one of the interior design projects for my friends. And the rest also was with the help of my husband, who saw this period not as my whim, but rather as a therapeutic process. So as July began, and despite a few days of excitement and planning what I could do, I remembered that I quickly felt depressed to such an extent that I spent the entire day in bed, thinking that nothing made sense, my life had no purpose, etc. And here I would like to make a small digression. This life, which was my current life, was my biggest dream a year ago. That means being able to create all day long, have a beautiful apartment, and do what I want. I talk about this in more detail in my previous episode, but I think it's very important to say that sometimes we idealize our dreams very much. We live them all our lives, and it might turn out that if we really had such a life, we would not want it after a month. An example from my perspective is that for a long time I idealized traveling. I thought that it was my lifestyle, that I would like to travel around Europe in a van, explore the world, and I watched all the travel vlogs with great nostalgia, especially those of a Polish couple called by a bus around the world. But interestingly, when I went deeper into this desire than just thinking, oh, I want to travel and I can't, so I am sad, I realized that my great desire is actually to be close to nature, to be in silence, to be surrounded by beautiful landscapes, and to have freedom. And I realized that I can meet these needs if, for example, I live somewhere in the mountains or by a lake, and for example, I have my own horse and I can ride in the mountains and go on a holiday twice a year. And when I got into what I thought I wanted, for example, living in a van and traveling around the world, I realized that I don't really like living in a car for longer than 2 weeks because it's important for me to have a washing machine, non-sporty clothes, and a normally sized kitchen. And that when I travel, I love being offline and I love entering this meditation mode, which cannot be said about professional travelers for whom the road and documenting it are a source of seed. So, when I feel nostalgic that I would like to drive a camper and be a traveler, I remember all this and understand that this need is probably related to the fact that lately I've been sitting at home in the center of Krakow in Poland all the time because I have a leg injury and I have a need to be close to nature. And with this example, I would like to encourage you to think about your needs and your life plans. Try to find somebody who does a similar thing to what you are dreaming of and write down all the aspects that are related to this type of life. For example, whether you will have a daily schedule determined by someone or you will have to take care of it yourself. And the question is, do you feel good that such responsibility falls on you? Another question, if you think you would like to live somewhere in the mountains, do you understand the fact that you will not be close to a store, a museum, cinema, cafe, or a gym? For some, this might be a huge advantage, but for others, those accustomed to social life in a city, it might not be such a great thing. Another thing is friends and family. From my own perspective, I know that living in the city center of Krakow, I meet a lot of friends who are in Krakow, for example, passing through, and the proximity of where I live allow us to meet, for example, an hour before they train. But if I lived 20 minutes outside of Krakow, which is not that far away, such last-minute meetings would probably be impossible. I'm talking about all this because I didn't ask myself these questions when I entered my 3 months period, and I wasn't aware of all the consequences of such a life. So why did I have these days of depression? First of all, I downplay the fact that I like to work in a clear structure, one that somehow imposed on me. Then I don't have to think whether something makes sense, I just follow a specific pattern. And here is a side note, such a system has many drawbacks and can be quite dangerous in operation, but maybe I will record a separate episode about it someday. An example is that I love going to all kinds of workshops or meditation retreats, which have a predetermined daily schedule. What time I get up, what time I eat breakfast. There is a work and a rest time block. I love it. And functioning this way, I woke up with a vision of 3 months with no goal, no daily schedule, not knowing what to do. Of course, it's quite easy to say that I could just sit down and start doing something, because in fact, the schedule only limits my creative work, but so many unknowns appeared in my head that it effectively blocked my work. Questions such as where to start, should I sit down and start immediately or should I sketch first? How much time should I give myself for sketching or how much time for painting? How long to paint one picture, etc. Now in hindsight, I see that it was like approaching this process from a very wrong angle, but back then I didn't have such a clear vision. The second fact is having a goal for a day and a bigger goal. When I worked in the office, it was quite clear. From Monday to Friday, my goal was to go to work and come back home after 9 hours. I felt quite fulfilled then because the work was done, even if, by the way, I didn't do anything that day. It gave me a sense of fulfillment. Also, but more general goal was also quite clear when it comes to designing a building. Well, the goal was to complete the certain stage, to win a competition, obtain a building permit, etc. And in my work at home, how could I measure at the end of the day whether the day had been used well, whether I have achieved my goal for the day or not? What was the greater goal? It's true that my goal was to explore and create, but how can I tell after 3 months whether I've done it? How can I measure it? Will trying all the techniques be the answer, even though none of the artwork is finished? Or should I rather look at it in terms of measurable, finished works? But how many art pieces will be a good result? Will it be okay to create just one during those 3 months or not? I remember thinking that maybe I should actually find a job just to have some structure in my day. Dumb, isn't it a huge paradox? I really put a lot of effort into being able to have this kind of time for myself, and then I voluntarily want to deprive myself of it. It's as if we were sitting in a cage. When it was opened, we flew out, but after a while, we came back because we didn't know how to behave outside. And again, in hindsight, I see that these questions only paralyzed me, but they were important questions that directly stem from the way I function. I like it when I know why I do things, when I have a clear goal in front of my eyes. Working in an office undoubtedly gave me such a purpose, although it was often illusory. I didn't appreciate it at that stage. My solution to these two overwhelming problems turned out to be a very clever idea. Namely, I decided that my goal for these 3 months would be to organize my own exhibition at the end of September. And by the way, it was always my huge dream, but very unattainable if I took into account creating a coherent collection, promoting my works, and cooperation with the art gallery. This idea of having my own exhibition turned out to be a very successful idea due to its simplicity and the usefulness it brought. Well, I immediately marked the day of September 23rd in my calendar, which gave me a clear point marking the end of this process so that it would not be prolonged indefinitely. Secondly, because I have a large apartment, I can easily remove the furniture from the living room to create about 20 square meters of exhibition space there. And thirdly, I knew that my friends would come and support me in the process. I also set myself a target of 20 artworks. This is how many works should be completed in any technique and format I like. This really helped me a lot. This exhibition was not a moment when I wanted to show off or anything like that, but it turned out to be the most important element, thanks to which my 3 months process really made sense. So coming back to the story, we have about the second week of July, an idea of an exhibition is there, which at the very beginning no one took seriously, to be honest, and a list of things that I would like to try. There was ceramics on the list, mainly because of the museums I visited. There was punch needle, a technique of waving, which I came across while reading an article in a newspaper, and I got fascinated about this. There was also painting icons, which I was delighted with after the exhibition I saw in Warsaw, and also painting and sketching. So I started with the research, first to find a workshop where I can learn how to paint icons. I knew that there are many schools that do this, but I wanted one that will combine learning the craft with some sort of a meditation. And I found this place called Nowica, which is in the southern part of Poland, where I learned how to paint Orthodox icons. I spent there about 8 days. Additionally, through my friend, I found a studio in Kazimierz, which is a district in Krakow, where I could go every day and create ceramics in clay. And I also watch a lot of YouTube videos about punch needle, how to get started, what types of yarn and needles I need to buy. And going a bit deeper into particular areas, when I went to the studio to create ceramics, I already had in my mind an image of creating a series of vases with interesting shapes and painting them with abstract patterns. And I learned how to create ceramics mainly from the internet. Nobody helped me there at the studio. When it comes to punch needle, it was quite similar. So I watched lots of tutorials on how to choose needle and how to weigh. And also I watched a movie in which someone made their own carpet. And it was also a big inspiration for me. I was quite excited that I can actually make something so useful. And the next paintings that came both in paint and in punch needle technique came spontaneously. I often had a specific color or shape in my mind that I wanted to compose on the canvas. I very rarely sketched beforehand. Rather, I got carried away by the process of changing, assessing, and altering. It was the same even with the carpet. I know that most of people who sit down to make something with that technique have already a specific design prepared, but I gave myself space to explore freely, to change the elements that I didn't like and continue creating. And as I said, when it comes to icons, I went for 9 days workshop and I came back with an icon that I created. This is what those 3 months look like. So I was just really slowly creating, having some new ideas emerging in my head. I was going to the ceramic studio, reading some books, meeting friends, and also going on a few trips abroad. I also went to some public swimming pools that were open in Krakow. And I think that in July and August, I was there practically every other day. And it was especially amazing to go there very early in the morning, to be able to swim and to sit down and see and drink a cup of tea. And I noticed that such days gave me a lot, and I had lots of energy to create afterwards. During these 3 months, it was certainly very difficult for me to understand and develop some sort of structure of the day. And now I see that at that stage, it was so important to me because I still felt quite insecure in this process. I felt that getting up, for example, at 8 and working till 6 p.m. would guarantee me that feeling that I was using the time well, instead of looking at the effects. I also felt guilty back then, for example, that I went to the swimming pool at 2 p.m., punishing myself that, well, no one who works could do such things. So I obviously didn't take my job seriously. And here's another paradox. I struggled with working in an office in fixed hours because I didn't like the fact that when I left work, it was often dark and I couldn't see the sun. And when I had the opportunity to, have the middle of the day off and work at night, I was punishing myself for it in my mind. And I think I just, needed some time. This is how these 3 months passed for me, creating and understanding and overturning certain patterns that I was discovering and breaking. And the day of the exhibition was approaching. I was still finishing some of the works, but I had over 20 of them. I was preparing the living room, making room for paintings, and thinking how to arrange the exhibition, making Instagram posts about the process, and sending out invitations. And then I was overcome with great fear. Thoughts such as these, that it makes no sense, that I have created such a silly thing and I'm inviting people who will often come from far away. But then I thought, hey, these thoughts didn't do me any good, but only showed me one false image, blurring the real image. Because yes, there is a chance that people will come and they won't like it. But I know that I gave as much as I could, that every artwork came from my thoughts and my heart. And it's no longer up to me how people will perceive it, because everyone has the right to have different feelings about it. Secondly, I knew that that confrontation at the exhibition was a very necessary element for me, and that I wasn't really forcing anyone to come to it. My friends show up out of curiosity and willingness to support me. It also gave me a lot to think that if someone from my friends organized such an exhibition, I would go there with great pleasure because I would simply be curious about the works they created, and no matter if I like them or not. The day of the exhibition itself was quite stressful for me, especially since there were lots of people online, and I'm not really good at managing several things at once. And I was afraid that people wouldn't hear or see it properly, etc. But after the first few minutes of stress, there was a great joy. It was an extraordinary experience watching people look at my paintings, tell me about their associations, and I can tell them about the process of creating them. Many people were also honestly amazed how many things could be created in such a short period of time using such different techniques. And here again is an interesting comparison with my inner critic, who told me before the exhibition that it was actually quite little, and that I could make more of that time that I had. This kind of my perfectionist mind. So at the exhibition, I saw several of my paintings, a series of my ceramic vases, 2 cups for espresso, some textile paintings, a short movie, and a collage. And finally, I would like to share with you my conclusions after these 3 months. I think it would be effective to say that, well, this period has radically changed me. I know what to do now, and I no longer have any doubts, and I'm developing a super prosperous business. We really want to hear such stories because they make us feel that it's possible. But I have the impression that very often they also leave us with a sense of hopelessness and powerlessness because such a huge change is not taking place in ourselves. That's why I came up with this idea of creating this podcast, because I wanted to create a place where I share my process with you without being at the end of its most bumpy road. I think I'm somewhere in the middle. Sometimes I don't know even where I'm going, because I know that this process itself has value. And this is something that I very rarely come across on the internet. Very often I hear stories of people who have undergone some kind of transformation and talk about this process, but because I compare my situation and I feel like I'm stuck in this chaos to theirs after going through all these difficult things, it's very hard for me to realize that I might actually go through that process as well and achieve what they achieved. So, where am I after this time, after this experiment? I will tell you about 3 things that I managed to achieve, I think. The first thing is that I realized that I don't have to stay in situations that are somehow harmful to me. And of course, I'm not talking about very violent environments. I'm rather talking about something that can be called remaining in silent desperation. For example, accepting the senselessness of life that takes place day by day and saying that, well, it's not that bad, it could be worse, so it's okay, without a shadow of a belief that we can change it. The second thing is that the whole process showed me various patterns that were stuck in my head. And while enjoying art, I was able to look at architecture from a perspective and understand why it caused me such pain. And thanks to this, now I'm actually returning to architecture step by step. And in fact, I have reached the decision to open my own office where I want to design spaces for meditation. For example, I want to deal with the materiality, with details, and sounds in architecture, which I was never able to develop while working in the office. And I want to combine it with my art. So the success here is that I can already think about architecture without fear or pressure. Although it's still a long process because it's still very difficult for me to read books about architecture, for example. And the third element I want to refer to what's the title of today's episode. So, why not drop everything and go? Thanks to these 3 months, I realized that I no longer want to give up everything and go on holidays. I realized that there are things in my life that give me joy, that I can be excited while waiting for my ceramics to fire, happy when I know that I will be waving a painting all day long. That happiness can be every day and not from one trip to another. I heard a great statement that people have two lives, and the second one begins when you understand that you only have one life. And I feel I'm at that point right now, and I have this feeling over several months. I think that life is truly amazing, and when I have a harder day, I go to the lake and I feel like crying because of how beautiful it is there, and it really gives me strength to continue fighting. It's not always easy for me. It's not always that I have a motivation to act or I have a clear goal in front of my eyes. But what I promise myself is that I will never again agree to live this mediocre life and stay in situations that are tiring for me, but which I cannot change because it's not up to me. And that's all for today. I hope that this episode was somehow inspiring for you and that I answered the questions that many people ask me. This episode was released in Polish and English. For now, is the only episode in 2 languages, so we'll see how it's going to be in the future. I invite you to my Instagram, Alexandra Wrubel, where you can see the story from my exhibition, but also many other posts starting from July. So that's all for today. I hope to speak to you soon. Bye.